If you study the history of the world, there's 1,000 stories, and thousand is an understatement, thousands and thousands of stories where someone takes over a country and then somebody else is in the minority, so they just pass a law taking all their property. Like, whether it's, happened to the Jews 1,000 times, it happened to the Christians under the Muslims, happens to the Muslims under the Christians, happens, to the Puritans under the Anglicans, happens to the Protestants under the Catholics, happens to the, to the Quakers, underneath the Puritans. It's amazing the creativity with which human beings have a way of deciding that someone else is other, and just taking their stuff. And eventually, if you're lucky enough to be able to flee with your life, then you've got your life. But if you can flee with your property, then you can start again. And so Bitcoin's the first time we solved that problem. We never really created perfected money. It's basically pharmaceutical grade gold, engineered or synthetic money that has infinite economic density. Not only can you carry all that you have, right, either in your head or on a hardware wallet, but you could also zap all that you have to your wife in another country or to your children if you needed to. And so it does represent, a new degree of freedom and sovereignty for the human race. And of course, that's desirable to everybody on the planet. In fact, it's not just desirable to all 8 billion people on the planet. Every company wants that. I mean, it's, companies get abused by countries just like people get abused, right? So at the end of the day, it solves a problem every human faces. It solves a problem every company faces. It also holds out some new ideas like most of the modern financial system is all about monetizing assets where people are forced to invest in stocks they don't want to invest in because the alternative is to have their money taken from them by inflation. So why does an 80-year-old retiree have to juggle stocks in order to avoid losing their life savings? Right? And so hence you have the creation of ETFs, and you have the creation of the S&P index, and you have the overvaluation of stocks. If a company ought to be worth 10 times cash flow, it's worth 20 times cash flow because there's a monetary premium assigned to it. You see a monetization of real estate in places like Canada or even the US where the house costs twice as much as it ought to cost because it's valued as an asset to store your wealth rather than as a property to live in. So in the absence of a decent financial asset to store your wealth, people will use Ferraris and Rolexes and Airbnb second apartments, and they'll buy random things they don't need, or they'll buy companies they don't need, and you'll end up with like the meme stock craze and all sorts of financial speculations. But ultimately, these are people that are faced with the choice of, I'm either going to lose everything because of inflation, or I'm going to buy something that I don't need now, but I'll speculate that in the future someone else will buy it from me. And hyperinflation, when the currency collapses, you'll buy crates of soap, you'll buy crates of toilet paper, right? You'll buy bins of charcoal, or you'll buy anything, lumber, because it's better to have the lumber than to have a bunch of paper worth nothing in 2 years. And so that of course results in a distortion of the financial markets, and it also results in a seizure of the actual manufacturing markets, right? Goods and services get out of kilter, and you end up with shortages and scarcity, and the economy just doesn't work, and eventually you're kind of ripped back to some kind of barter, right? Where the economic engine is just cut in half. And we see that in different places today. And of course, once the currency collapses, right, that's kind of the end of the society, right? That happened in Rome. When the currency collapses, then everybody kind of moves back on their own farm and they produce everything they eat. which is kind of a nice idea, except for the fact that if everybody has to produce everything they own and eat, the carrying capacity of the society is cut by a factor of 20. Right? You need specialization. And so that's the challenge we face. And Bitcoin is the first digital monetary network. And it offers people the ability to do something rational. And I guess I'll make one more point, which is most corporations, they basically don't accumulate capital. They give all their capital back to their shareholders, or they go into debt as fast as they can. And the reason that you would go into debt as a company is because positive working capital is dilutive to your shareholders. You want negative working capital. So if you're a rational corporation, you're better off to borrow $1 billion and pay interest on it than you are to keep $1 billion in cash flow and get paid the interest on it. And that's because the interest you get paid on your cash is less than the monetary inflation rate. So what you see is this LBO craze, and you see most corporations in the world, they dividend out all of their earnings, they buy back their stock, and then they take on debt or they do acquisitions. All of these things are long-term, making the company weaker. But they're doing it because over the near term, those look accretive to the shareholders. And they're accretive because the sovereign debt is yielding less than the monetary inflation rate after tax. And Bitcoin represents a cure to that. It's now possible for a company just to accumulate Bitcoin on its balance sheet. So if you generate billions in cash flow, instead of giving it away to your shareholders and paying a dividend tax on it, you just buy Bitcoin with it, and the Bitcoin is appreciating at double or triple the rate of the monetary inflation. So Bitcoin is accretive. You can actually just keep your capital and generate shareholder returns on the Bitcoin, and you will get a progressively more powerful endowment. You'll be better endowed each year. So corporations, instead of having a short life expectancy and crashing because they're running on negative working capital, will actually get stronger, which would be good for jobs, right? They wouldn't, every time a company goes bankrupt, it doesn't help the workforce, right? Right? You want the companies to not go bankrupt. So it'd be better for jobs, better for consumer options. It would create better products, better services. It would be more stable for the community, right? And that's what Bitcoin offers.
What are your thoughts on the other ones, or do you not even think about the others because you're just so laser focused on Bitcoin?
Bitcoin isn't the first crypto idea. I mean, people tried 50 times before to launch a crypto network, and they all failed for one reason: they were too centralized. There was an attack surface. Generally, the problem is if there's a corporation or there's a founder and they keep control, if you keep a beneficial interest in the network, you've really created a security, and probably an unregistered security. You're creating an equity. So the only way for this thing to come to life as a protocol is you have to disclaim beneficial interest, and you have to give up control of the network, right? Like if you look at the religions of the world, whether it's Judaism or Christianity or Islam, the founders are all dead. They're gone, right? You have to pay, and they gave it as a gift, right? So there are a lot of protocols in the world that are successful. For example, base 10 math, the English language, the French language. These are successful protocols. Fire, electricity, there are technologies and techniques that are successful. But if Prometheus was still here and wanted to cut, every time you started fire, or if Prometheus was tinkering with the fire, somehow it wouldn't quite have the same energy to it. So what Bitcoin has going for it is Satoshi launched it with the Immaculate Conception and then went away. And those Satoshi coins never moved. And so you don't have a company that controls it. And you don't have a beneficiary. And it was given as a gift to the world. if you want to create an open source protocol, I'll give you another example of a successful one. Linux. It's because Linus Torvalds isn't charging you a fee and it isn't controlling Linux. There are plenty of open source protocols that are successful, but ultimately they have to be given to the community. You have to let go of them. And when you let go of them, maybe they have a chance of living. If we look at all the cryptos right now, Bitcoin is the only crypto network universally acknowledged as a commodity. And that means an asset without an issuer. A commodity is ethically superior and legally superior to a security. A security has an issuer and has a beneficiary, and therefore there is someone that has an ethical obligation to be fair and truthful in their disclosures to the counterparties. Right? If I can control the amount of my stock, then I have to be truthful to you about whether I will or will not print 100 million more units of it next week. It's just common sense. So the real issue is, out of the tens of thousands of other cryptos, how many of them are assets without an issuer? Well, there might be half a dozen. We can debate, like, is Litecoin an asset without an issuer, or who controls these things? But it's a debate. With Bitcoin, it's universally agreed. It's been endorsed by 2 heads of the SEC, by the head of the CFTC, by senators, by Congress people, by governors, by mayors, by academics, even by everybody in the crypto community, right? There is no debate that Bitcoin is sufficiently decentralized to be an asset without an issuer. And for it to be an institutional grade asset, for an institution to buy it, it can't be a security. It needs to be a commodity. An institution can buy a registered security. That's like you take Apple public and you issue 10,000 pages of SEC disclosures. They can buy one of those, but if we consider that, Apple stock doesn't make money for the world. Like that is, Chinese can't save their life savings for 100 years in Apple stock, right? You can see why that wouldn't work. Right, or the Russian government, or nobody in Africa or South America is going to build their treasury on the stock of an American company. So what you need is a commodity, and there's the debate about a few, but they're all 1/100th as big as Bitcoin. Then there's a lot of other good ideas and interesting ideas, a lot of fun ideas. Stable coins are interesting. DeFi exchanges are interesting, crypto exchanges are interesting, NFTs and they're all interesting things, but they're all highly controversial, and there's a lot of uncertainty about the legal status. Like, if they're securities, then they're going to be tagged with securities requirements. And right now, the securities regulators in the world have not offered any pathway for a digital security to trade 24/7, 365. So forget about whether or not they're registered or not, right? I can't trade Apple stock on Saturday afternoon on a crypto exchange, even though it's registered. You see, so there's not a regulatory path for the other cryptos. Now, I'm empathetic, like, it'd be nice if there was. If you want to grow that industry, you need a digital assets framework. But the sad fact of the matter is, the only thing that we have clarity on is that Bitcoin is a commodity, and you will be allowed to own it as digital property. The Chinese have deemed it property. You can own it in China, you can own it in Russia, you can own it in the United States, you can own it in Europe. You can own Bitcoin as property anywhere where property is not illegal. So, like, maybe in Cuba, North Korea, where it's illegal for any individual to own anything, right? Pure communist regimes, then it's going to be a difficult situation. But otherwise, this is a digital commodity, which is better than any physical commodity, and it's a digital property that's better than any physical property. And there really isn't any debate about that. You've got good clarity on that. And so my view on this is that Bitcoin is a solution that the universe, that the world has agreed on, that has consensus. It's a good thing and useful. Everything else is a murky, uncertain